So thanks for having us down tonight. Brett and I are pretty excited to get out of town, especially leave the Arctic blast that is up north. You guys are pretty cold down here, but nothing like we are up there. Brett's going to talk to you guys a little bit tonight about the South Fork of the Snake River. And before you say, oh, been there, done that, boo, he's going to talk about a little bit different season and a little bit different hatch on that river. We're going to talk a little bit about the mutant golden stones. And for years growing up on this river, we just thought the mutant golden stone was your standard golden stone that just hadn't developed a wing. But after years, you know, of course, being decent fly fishermen and guides, doing our research, we discovered it was a completely different species. Well, we didn't discover that. It was we were informed that it was a completely different species. Classenia sabulosa is what we're talking about. If you're not into, you know, the Latin, and I'm not either, just sounded cool. Basically, we're talking about those stones that come out in late August and September on this particular river. And the thing that makes them a little bit different is from a standard golden stone or a Terra narcissus or a big salmon fly, is that these guys' typical mode of transportation is not to fly, but is to skitter across the water. Okay, and so he's Chernobyl ant that's been around for quite some time now, really found its home on the South Fork of the Snake because of that, all right, because of this mode of transportation that this stonefly does. The big key on this one is typically 1st of September, our irrigation season starts to taper off or ends.
I'm going to say one thing there, you're going into my whole presentation.
Oh, sorry. And anyway, Brett was going to tell you all this stuff.
I was going to tell you all about that, but now he is.
But basically that we start having water drops, and that makes these a real active and a real prevalent insect. So I'm going to tie just a few bugs for you, some that are totally specific for that, but others that are going to be kind of common for you. So the first fly that we're going to do is basically a chubby Chernobyl, okay? Chubby Chernobyl ant's just a winged variation of the Chernobyl ant, but we're going to talk a little bit about proportions for that particular river and what we do a little different. And the first thing is we like to go a little skinnier, okay? We like to size down for this particular hatch. So instead of a real big, thick, overdressed Chernobyl ant, we start to go a little bit smaller, all right? So I'm starting with some 140 denier Danville, just in yellow, and this is a Dairiki 270 hook, basically just that grasshopper hook, has a nice curve to it. And I've got a piece of 2mm foam here in brown, and I'm going to go ahead and just trim the back of this a little bit. I don't like them coming to a real perfect point, more like a screwdriver, little chisel point right there. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to tie that foam right on the back. Whoops, excuse me. If you ever tied with any of this foam, oh, I like to do that. It keeps the fish off. A lot of times,
that's your weed guard, isn't it?
that's taking catch and release to the next level. We like to just not even catch them.
There's nothing we can't edit out.
Yeah, thanks. And so we just got a little back end on this guy with a piece of foam to start this thing out.
That was your weed guard.
That was the weed guard.
That was a weed guard.
That was to keep the rainbows off. And now what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and double body fore and aft, and then I'll work my way up through this. I'm just going to do a little bit of yellow ice dub on this. Not going to do a dubbing loop. Just going to spin it right on the thread here. And I like to keep these guys pretty thin. You know, the take-home message here is try to be a little smaller. And I think what Brett and I have figured out, you know, and anybody that's fished or guided on rivers and spent a lot of time on them, is there's only so many fly shops in the area, and typically people are fishing those flies that they're buying from those shops. So when we tie our flies for our clients or for ourselves to fish, we like to go a little sparser, a little thinner, just to give them a little bit of a different look than what they're seeing on those commercial flies. So this one isn't going to be real thick, real overtied. It's going to be pretty sparse. So we've got our tail out the back there. We've got our body dubbed. And now what we're going to do is we're just going to take a little bit of synthetic wing material. This particular material is one that we carry at Snake River Fly. It's just polypropylene yarn, macrame yarn, combed out and dressed. We have it in a lot of different colors. We call it Grizz Frizz, and it floats really well, floats like a cork. It's kind of the same stuff that some of those original strike indicators were made out of. Highly flammable though, so you don't see too many more macrame on the market anymore, at least not this type. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tie in a single wing back here. And it's just going to act to kind of keep that back into that fly floating. And acts as kind of a little bit of a visible indicator. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tie this in the middle, and instead of clipping it off real short like this, I'm using half the amount that I would normally use, and I'm going to fold it. And that'll help lock that wing, excuse me, making it weedless again. Lock that wing in there. And then most people are going to, most of the time we clip that relatively short. That's just going to represent, I know that I said that we're kind of trying to imitate an insect that doesn't have a full wing, but this does keep the fly riding up well. The female does have a full wing, the male doesn't. So then in standard Chernobyl ant style, I'm going to put a rubber leg over on this side. This is just your standard old medium round rubber. Definitely play with different rubber legs on these guys. Some of the silicone stuff is pretty neat, but the good old-fashioned round rubber seems to have a little bit more liveliness to it. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking for something that's really going to make an imprint on the water. A small amount of dubbing on just to cover my tracks here. Just to make it look pretty. And then I'm just going to come all the way up to just behind the hook eye here. Just a single layer of foam on this. We were talking about Teton Valley Lodge earlier. It's a lodge that's been up on the river for a bunch of years. They'll do 3 or 4 layers of this foam on there so they can really float those big heavy tungsten nymphs. We kind of go just the opposite. We want these guys to ride right down in the water. A little more of our Grizz Frizz here. Make this one a little longer here. A little bit more. I was a little shy. Nice thing about tying this foam stuff and this synthetic stuff is you don't have to be really a fantastic feather manager or fur manager. It's all created equal. You're just going to end up kind of cutting it and trimming it anyway. So,
Can I ask you one question?
You sure
can double that second layer over?
Well, I meant to, and that's what I was just explaining, is that I chose a little bit, not quite enough. So I kind of improv'd right there, Brett. Okay. And I'll take another couple of rubber legs here. And we're just going to tie those over on the side. Like I said, this isn't, we're not rewriting the books here on this one, just to get me loosened up a little bit and kind of show you, the basic stuff. I remember the first Chernobyl ant I saw was probably in about 1990, and I thought it was a joke. The 2 guys I was fishing with had been guiding on the river for a couple of years. I was lucky enough to get a day on a boat. They pulled out a Chernobyl ant, and I thought it was a cigarette butt. And I laughed at him until about the 4th or 5th fish had come to the boat, and then I said, "Give me one."
I know some of you guys might remember some of the original Chernobyl ants were 2.5 inches long.
Huge.
God awful.
I mean, and what did
And
they
the fish-
represent?
Yeah, fish gorged on them.
I was going to build a little head on this. All these foam flies like this that had the foam extending out the front. Personally like to kind of build that little dam right there. It kind of keeps from that tippet. A lot of times your tippet will get sandwiched in between that piece of foam and the hook eye and foul your fly up. So I like to build a little bit more of a dam in there. The beauty about these rubber legs and these foam flies is after you tie it all off, you can manipulate it and get it to lie flat how you want. Trim the head off here. And we like, on the South Fork, we like to put a little corner on them like that. And believe it or not, from a guide standpoint, you know, being on the water every day, seeing what works and what doesn't, those two little eyes right there makes a pretty big difference.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately, it does, you know. And then you can see my fingers all messed up from tying earlier this morning, but I'll just take and put some banding on these legs. Brett brought a pretty good example of the bugs that we use. I think it's up on the bar there. There's quite a few different patterns that definitely imitate this insect well.
Yeah, one of the things we can't live without on the river is a set of Sharpies.
Definitely, we definitely use our coloring kits a lot. It helps a bunch. Like I said, pretty industrial, nothing fancy. Definitely isn't, you know, a Rennie Harrop or anything like that. But this fly, you know, and then I'd do a little head cement and all that kind of stuff to make it a little more durable. But, you know, just real simple stuff like that with a yellow underbelly that's really pretty thin, has a really small profile, is the stuff that we fish. So that's standard Chernobyl ant. Chubby Cherb, just tied a little different. So the next one that we're going to do on this same hook, which is a number 8 Dairiki 270, is a little bit different. This one's called a double wing. Really a good cutthroat fly, this one. Love it on the South Fork. Really like it on the Middle Fork of the Salmon. And it's just a little bit of a modification of a Randall Kaufman stimulator. I'll do the same thing and work with a little bit lighter dubbing here. And I want to put a couple biots out for the tail on this one. So I'm just going to put a real small amount of ice dub, which I kind of turned black there, but that's okay. That'll be an egg sac now. Just going to do a little ball dubbing back here, and that will allow for those biots to flare like the natural tail of a stonefly. So just using some goose biot here. You can buy it in a whole feather like that. This little side right here is where you get the good stiff biots off of. The other side is what you wrap your little PMD bodies with. And we're just going to run a couple little tails out the back. Not really super particular on how they lay. But we don't want them really long. You know, like maybe you would see on a Prince nymph. We're running them a little shorter, a little bit more like the natural insect. Now I'll just trim off that excess there. Whoops, or I'll try. And now we're just going to go ahead and continue dubbing the abdomen of this fly. Hopefully I'll get it to not be black. So it's similar to a stimulator without the hackle. I'm just going to go ahead and dub the abdomen. So about 2/3 of the way up the shank here. Getting a little bigger as we go. Now we're going to add our first wing. And this is where it gets a little bit funky. This stuff works great, this synthetic polypropylene wing material. But really, if you really want to get serious about it, the grizzly bear hair, legally sourced grizzly bear hair. Okay, I want to make sure we add that. Actually, the guy we get this stuff from is a trapper up in Alaska, and we'll get this stuff from him. Started out as a joke back, I think, at the South Fork Lodge at Spence Warner's place. And I think it was Doug Easter maybe that decided that that bear pelt that was hanging on the wall over there would make a really neat stonefly wing. I think that was probably in the early 80s, I'm guessing. And so they clipped a little bit of this grizzly bear hide off, and what do you know? Sure enough, works really well. And we're doing it a little different. We work with it a little different than you would think. We're not really necessarily interested in all this beautiful stuff out on the tips. What we're really interested in is the under fur and all the insulating value and the bulk that's right down next to the hide. Okay, and this stuff we've tried black bear, we've tried stuff that is from the lower 48, doesn't have near the durability and the floatability of the real stuff from up north. So I've tied that clump, I've cut that off right at the base of the hide, and I've flipped it around. And what I'm interested in, I'll thin that out just a bit, but what I'm interested in is this curly, downy insulating stuff underneath here. This stuff with some floatant on it, some silicone floatant, floats amazingly well and is extremely durable. Definitely a lot of Jackson Hole one fly bugs from Scott Sanchez and Ken Burkholder and Uli, rest his soul. All those guys, they're the ones that kind of started bringing this grizzly bear hair or the bear hair fly into realm, and I was lucky enough to be staying in the same trailer park, so got in on the inside scoop. So basically we just got a stimulator going here with a biot tail and a dubbed body. And now I'm going to go ahead and just put a set of legs on here. Same style as the Chernobyl ant or the Matamex, that kind of style. Tying them in on the sides. Same stuff, using that medium rubber. This fly is a little bit more dainty, a little bit more likely to ride down in the water column than the flies with a lot of foam on them. And so I just have those legs. I'll give you a tip up. You can kind of see what we're looking at from the top. And now I'll just dub in between those rubber legs, and we'll move into our second set of legs and our second wing. Just filling in a little bit there. Going a little bigger than I did on the abdomen to get that thorax. And it tapers down just kind of like a Kaufman's would. Kaufman stimulator, excuse me. And so now I'm going to move back to, a 1/16 of an inch or so behind that hook eye. I want to leave a little room here. We've got a few more things to tie on. And I'll take another clump of that bear hair. You could definitely do this with a synthetic wing material. Be a great fly. But not quite as durable and not quite as high floating as the bear hair. Do a few wraps right in front of this just to kind of get it to prop up so it doesn't crowd my hook eye. This grizzly bear hair also makes really, really good caddis flies. Then we'll come up and we'll add another set of legs up here. And the big thing, Brett's going to talk a lot about how to fish these flies, but it really kind of is counterintuitive to the natural drift and the fly floating, drag free in the current. It's the opposite. He's gonna tell you how we do it completely the opposite of what you'd think. Really want some movement. And this one has a lot of rubber, so a lot of leg action going on. Now I'll do a little bit more dubbing. This fly could definitely be fished just like this. call it good. And I definitely tie them pretty much like that a lot of times, but the double wing that we've been really having success with has just a little bit of foam on the head. Same thing, this 2mm foam. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and try to create just a little bit of a wing case like those stoneflies have. And I've cut the corners off, and now I'll do a little V. You know, probably more for the fly tyer than the fish, but sometimes we do that. Now I'm just going to go ahead and lay this right on top. I'm just behind the head with my thread. This one's called the double wing. And we don't have this one out with anybody or anything. It's just we do it, carry it in the shop. We're kind of lucky in that fact at my shop. Been fortunate enough to been in the fly fishing program at Idaho State for going on 13 years now, so I kind of got a fresh batch of fly tyers that come through. You okay? And so a lot of our flies tied at our shop are local flies. And we'll do the same thing that we did on the Chubby. We'll just trim the head just a little bit, make us feel a little bit better about ourselves. Let's see, I tied it off, so we're good to go there. Okay, and then on this one, a lot of the guys will leave these legs this long, okay, just to start with. They might trim them a little bit as they get on the water and shorten them up a little bit, but remember, we're really trying to, for this particular insect that we're trying to imitate, we're really trying to create a commotion on the water. You know, for my liking, I would probably clip them up just a little bit, just to try to make it look a little bit more like, you know, something respectable that you take home and show mom. And we can do the same thing. We can put our stripes on the legs. You don't need to do this, but as a lot of you might know, you know, if you have confidence in the fly, you might fish it a little harder. You might give her a few extra casts, and could lead to a few more fish. So, rides a little lower, doesn't have quite as much foam on it. Sets down, the only foam that's on it is just that little bit right on the front, and this guy sets down just a little bit lower. And what we start finding, especially as the one fly starts, the cutthroat that have been fished to all year, and you guys probably see some of this on the green too, they become pretty selective by the tail end of the year. And what we notice is a lot of those fish will come up under a fly, they'll open that mouth, and if that fly doesn't get displaced and fall into their mouth, they don't eat it. They've already been through a season of it. And so your standard shop fly that's 2 or 3 pieces of foam, tied on a little bigger hook, a little bit more overdressed, they might never hit their lips. You know, they'll open their mouth on it, but it doesn't fall in. And so definitely in the one fly, we think about stuff like that, you know, whatever it takes to get a couple extra. You know, and I'll let Brett talk about that a little bit more, but not so much. These guys, these flies, these insects, when they're out looking for a mate, are typically in big flats, okay, big shallow flats. And what happens is as that water drops with irrigation every day and it goes lower, all those insects that were in that 6 feet of the gravel bar, they emerge, and they typically emerge at night, and they'll skitter across the water. The males will take off across the water looking for a mate. And so, and Brett will tell you kind of more how we do it and when we do it, but a little bit more so that we're creating an active fly. Okay, this is a little bit more, would be described as dry fly streamer fishing. Like really exaggerated, and Brett will talk about how he does it. I don't want to steal his thunder here, but really exaggerated strips. Okay, so the last one I'll do here is definitely one that's scored very well in the one fly. This particular one, I think it's either with Rainey's or maybe Orvis. one of them. Orvis, probably. And this one's called the Legend Golden Stone. This one was created pretty much for the one fly, same idea. Something that set down a little bit lower and was a little bit more of a profile. Looked a little bit more realistic. So same hook, again, number 8, 270, same thread on this guy. On this one, we're going to do a little bit more foam work. What I want to do is I got 2 pieces of 2mm foam here, and they're cut at a little bit of a taper. Okay, I want them pretty small on the back end and a little bit wider up on the front end. And what we're going to do on this one is on your side of the hook, I'm just going to tie in that tail end of foam right there. Okay, and when you're tying this foam in, anytime you're working with foam, find it works really well to do a loose wrap or maybe even 2 loose wraps and then pull your tension tight. If you try to keep tension on all the way over, it'll tend to rotate. Oops, did I lose you?
Talk.
There we go. There we go. And so I've tied that piece of foam on purpose on that side of the hook, okay, versus on the top or on the bottom. And now I'm going to take my brown piece and I'm going to tie that in on my side of the hook. Okay, and I've got a loose wrap here. And now I'll do another loose wrap. And then as I get it where I want it, then I'll pull that tension. Okay, that way I'm not causing this whole mechanism to spin around the hook. All right, so we have our yellow tied on, which is going to be our belly. We have our brown, which is going to be the dorsal part or the back. And I've just cinched it in like so. You know, if I want to, which I probably should, if I was going to fish this, I would tie down that little piece of foam right there. And now what we're going to do is we're just going to take and fold these materials, okay, these 2 pieces of foam. At the same time, I'm going to fold them forward, and I'm going to stretch them just a little bit. And I'm going to just make a little small segment right back there with a couple thread wraps, okay? Now that I have that segment formed and everything's facing forward, now I'll turn my foam so I have yellow on the bottom, brown on the top. Okay, it's just a little easier to attach everything by working it sideways. And so now what we'll do is we'll put a couple tails on here. Once again, I'm just going with goose bite here. And we'll put one over on this side. Same tie-in spot right where I made that last foam segment. I'll do another one over on this side. Whoops, there's 2 of them there. It'll be a triple tail. And we'll tie one over on this side. And just trying to keep them about the same length. Secure those. Now what we'll do is I'll pull my foam back out of the way here. And I'm just going to creep my thread right up onto the hook shank. Like so. That little gap. And now I'm going to go ahead and tie down what's left of these biots. This will all be covered up. There's another one someplace. There it is. Pull him back through here. There we go. That was a struggle, but we got it. Apparently the beer's working. And just tying down the waist in. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start working our way forward a bit here. We're going to get 2 or 3 more segments. Just increasing the segment size a little bit as I go. Put the 2 pieces of foam together, loose wrap, loose wrap, and pull it tight. That'll keep it from jumping around, like I said. Now I'll pull my foam out of the way, and I'll jump forward on my hook shank. Couple wraps to get us to move forward. And create another segment. Foam's pretty fun stuff to tie with. You can get some pretty realistic looking stuff. So I've got 3 segments on there. Yellow on the bottom, brown on the top. And one thing that we've noticed on this Glissenia, this mutant stone, is that because they do move around by skittering around on the water, their back set of legs sets back a little bit farther than your standard golden stone or Pteronorsis. They really have some beefy legs back there. And they're a little farther back. So I'm going to go ahead and it's basically, we're going to call that about the midpoint of the hook. Okay? I'll just fold this foam out of the way. And if you want, you can, the Renzetti's nice. You can tuck it out of the way like that, or you could put it on the hook point. And I'm just going to tie a single rubber leg in, doing some X wraps, kind of basically the same way you would tie a Pat's rubber leg. I want them perpendicular to the shank of the hook. And just make sure we've got enough wraps in there that isn't going to come undone. Of course, if we were tying this for the one fly, we'd put about 5 pounds of glue on it right now. Make sure it's not going to come untied. Now I'll just fold these 2 forward, and we'll build one more segment just right in front of that back set of legs, those rear legs. Now we'll just repeat that step, moving that foam out of the way so I can get my thread back on that hook shank. We'll do another.
Have you found that the depth of the segments affect the take ratio?
It's interesting. The depth of the segments. I haven't really. Just as long as it's skinny and a little sparser, and like I said, mostly this one was created because of the weight of the fly. We wanted something that would, when those fish opened their mouth up, this fly would fall in. In fact, originally the guy I tied this for named this one the deep throat, because when we'd catch a cutthroat, the fly would be way back in there. And of course, Orvis didn't like that name, so, we're not Kelly Gallup. We can't pull that yet. So we changed the name to the Legend or Golden Stone. Okay, and that last little segment like so. And so basically what I've had here is I've crept up a little bit farther than I want to, okay, towards that hook eye. And the nice thing about tying with this foam like this is where it's encompassing the hook shank, is if I want to, I can just wiggle everything back just a little bit. Still going to give it nice shape, but that's going to give me the room that I need up there. Okay. And so now on this one, we're going to go ahead and we'll strap our wing on here. On this one, once again, we're going to use a little of our polypropylene, our Grizz Frizz. Fair hair, definitely fine with this one, if you got it. If you can find it. I'm just going to put that wing on there like so, and I'm going to tie it in right in the middle, because I am going to fold this one back as well. A couple wraps like so, and now we'll fold that back on itself. The nice thing about doing that is that material, that wing's locked in there pretty well. It's going to have to come, through those folds in order to come undone. Versus if I would have just clipped it right here, that wing could eventually pull out. Okay. So now we've got room for that last set of legs, which is going to go just right here. piece of foam out of the way. This last set of legs is going to go in just behind the hook eye. This one's a little overdressed, and we kind of do it on purpose like that because, like I said, we want this fly to be a little lighter. And when they open that mouth, it's going to fall in there a little better. Flipping out. And so there's that last set of legs. And now we'll do this last segment right here. How's that? Better?
Better.
Awesome. Okay, so we have our last set of legs in. If you look at this guy from underneath, all yellow underneath, pretty nice segmentation. The body's pretty narrow, pretty small. Okay? Got our wings setting up here, and I know we talked about this thing being the mutant, that the males don't have a wing, but that's because we can cut this and trim it if we need to, if that be the case. All right? And so now what we're going to do is we're going to take one more little piece of foam. This is similar to what we did on the double wing. And I'll cut my little wing case in there. Like I said, this is probably more for the fishermen than the fish. And then we'll take this last piece and put it right on top. And we're going to use that to push our wing and hold our wing down a touch. And now in that same spot, we'll just kind of stack this like so. And now what we're going to do is I'm going to flip that over so I can see what I'm doing. I'm going to clip this bottom piece of foam off. Clean that up a little bit. And we'll cut our head to length here. And then I'm just going to tie it off right on the foam. With some whips. And now we'll trim our head just a little bit more accurate to that stonefly. Couple eyes on it. Okay, now this was where this one takes a little bit of a twist. Back when this fly first came out, this was a pretty innovative thing. Nowadays it's pretty common to knot your rubber legs. Okay, there's a lot of fly patterns out there. The Pat's rubber leg, quite a few different ones. And we definitely notice that it does make a difference to put a little knot in there. And so what we're just going to do is we're just going to take and place a small overhand knot in each one of these legs. Yep, it takes a little bit more time. You cry a little bit more when you put this one in the bush. But it does give you a little bit better profile. We think it fishes a little better this way. We could be crazy. Trying to get my legs to kind of go the right way. You can roll your knot just a little bit. That's how you get them to go the direction you want. Maybe we can see this. I'm just taking and doing a twist and poking the tail end of the rubber leg back through that knot, sliding it up to where I want. Try to do it up like this, and then pull that knot tight. And if I want it, if it's pointing the wrong direction, I can just roll my knot just a little bit back, and that'll get it to point the direction I want it to. Okay? Come on the near side here. Same thing. That one's pointing the wrong way, so we'll just slide our knot just a little bit, maybe out. That'll get us pointing in the direction we want. If anybody's had a chance to watch any of Ken Burkholder's stuff, he was the club sandwich guy originally back in the day. Great guide that worked on the South Fork for a long time, but that's kind of his contribution definitely to Swan Valley and the South Fork was a lot of this foam stuff and these knotted legs. And of course we all learned it from him and we still do it. It's had a little bit more of a complicated time consuming fly, but this one definitely has worked well for us. There we go, close enough. So now I've got all those really cool elbows in this guy. We'll take and put some marks on the leg. This just makes the legs look a little bit more realistic. Silicone legs would work fine for these guys too. They just don't quite have the bounce that the original round rubber does. And we're looking for the action on these guys. We'll give our legs a little cut. Most guides that are guiding on the South Fork nowadays are carrying scissors, glue, and a whole bunch of Sharpies with them. You know, if the Chernobyl they're fishing, the tan Chernobyl isn't doing it for them, they'll color the belly purple or pink or whatever until they start finding one that does work better for them. Originally this fly had some Russian boar. I think that's probably what it says in the recipe, but there's a great new material, just came out from Hairline. This is called Voodoo Fibers. It's a really fine, small mylar almost material, and it comes in a ton of different colors, but I can see where this would be great on lateral lines, small legs on beetles, stuff like that, but it works great for an antenna. So we'll put our antennas out the front of this one, just two of those guys. I'm just going to use a little Zap gel here. Super glue would work fine too. Of course, everybody's leery of working with glue. I am too. Great way to ruin a good fly. Pull out the glue. And I'm just putting a little of this Zap-A-Gap in between these two pieces of foam. Now I'll just take my two pieces of antenna here and slide them right in between those two pieces of foam, and then we'll just push those shut for a second or two. Hopefully you don't, whoops. See, that's glue for you.
Larry, is it easier for you to do it this way as opposed to tying it in with that top piece of foam?
To do the antenna?
Yeah.
Definitely, if they didn't stick out so far out the front for the whip finish, that would be the easier way to go for sure. Yep. Typically what I'm doing when I'm tying these is I'll get them all pretty much tied and then go through them, finish them up with the antenna. I mean, this is one of those flies over the years that was definitely one that we had to have sent off and have tied by Orbis or somebody to make it practical for us. So, but this is the Legend Golden Stone, and it definitely works really well for the mutant stone or the Classenia that Brett's going to talk about. Great little pattern. Should be available in a few more sizes and a few more colors from Orbis, actually in 2019. So. But that's a little bit of what we've got. So, you know, we've got a pretty good idea of what we're trying to imitate here. One thing on these golden stones that Brett's going to talk about, they are a little bit smaller than what you're used to on your Henry Sport golden stones that follow right behind salmon flies and that type of stuff. So size 8s and 10s are quite fine versus size 6s, you know, a little bit smaller. And then, like I said, Brett's going to tell you how to fish these things. really a fun time to go fish the South Fork, for sure. You know, kids go back to school in September and the river lightens up a little bit, and that's prime time for the mutant action. Any questions? No, they're ready for Brett. Thank you. Appreciate it.